What I want to tell you about today is I want to start by telling you about a few young men. First is Eric. Eric was born in 1966. He grew up in the U.S. in an era of freedom and expression. Eric had a brother, an older brother named Daniel, and he had a mother and a father, but his father died when he was 15. And around the same time, Eric dropped out of school and became a carpenter with Daniel. When he was 17, his mother convinced him to join a Christian group, and he began to get involved with Christian youth programs and attend church services. But this wasn't the positive reinforcement that Eric needed. Instead, Eric Robert Rudolph, also known as the Olympic Park Bomber, would develop radical views that encouraged him to engage in 3 terrible acts of violence that he accredited to the Christian army. In Israel, born about a year before Eric, is Asher. Asher had 8 younger siblings. He developed a reputation for kindness and giving in school. When he was 18, he had the opportunity to attend a new yeshiva in his community. While Asher was standing in an open-air market waiting for a van to pick him up to take him to school, a car pulled up. 3 men jumped out, and while 2 of them held him down, the third one stabbed him in the chest with a knife. Ultimately, Asher died from the wound. Why would a kind young man like Asher be such a specific target? Perhaps because the school that he was attending was tied to a radical group called the Jewish Underground, which 3 years earlier had committed a series of car bombings of Palestinian targets. But don't worry, Asher was avenged by 3 men tied to the Jewish Underground who walked into an Islamic college, spraying the crowd of students with bullets and throwing grenades. Hasib was born in Leeds, England. He was the youngest of 4 children, just like he was the youngest of 4 companions traveling together the day he died. He was only 18 years old. 2 years earlier, he had received general certificates in English literature, science, design technology, and business. Earlier the same year he died, he had completed an advanced certificate in business from Thomas Danby College in Leeds. Perhaps that's why he hesitated, why Hasib Hussein's bomb exploded an hour after his companions. His companions, who, though they were far apart, their bombs, all 3 of them, exploded within seconds of each other. But those companions were not all that different from Hasib. 22-year-old Shikhzad Tanweer was described by his friends as infinitely likable, and he was known to have an interest in sports, cars, and Elvis. Hasib and Shikhzad were even members of the Omar Mosque, whose imam condemned the bombings during Friday prayer the next day. Another one of their companions, Jermaine Lindsay, was born in Jamaica. He was a husband, and at the time, his wife was 7 months pregnant. He had even mourned the victims of September 11th, just 4 years before the bombings. But not all stories of religion and youth are violent. I wasn't quite as young as these men when I found my faith, but I didn't have any knowledge of religion. Public school I attended avoided the topic like the plague. The one young girl I knew who confessed a strong religious conviction was mocked for it. No one ever came to her defense. Other students who did go to church occasionally would mention things like the presents they received at confirmation, but I didn't even know what confirmation was till almost a decade later. And as for my family, well, we stopped attending church when I was pretty young, so I didn't get that exposure either. In fact, I think I knew Greek mythology, or more about Greek mythology than I did about modern religion. And I was left to find religion on my own. When I did, I bought a study Bible and I started listening to religious radio programs, not realizing that all the material that I had picked up skewed heavily towards one extreme of Christianity. It was only by sheer luck that I found myself in a church that expressed different views that allowed me to reevaluate what it was to be Christian. I consider myself a fairly intelligent man, but I can't help but think that for a year or so, I was in just the right mindset to be influenced by all the wrong people. It's as simple as that missing foundation of education that makes all the difference. That gap in knowledge and understanding and the nature of the adolescent mind, malleable and receptive, is exactly why extremists target young people. But knowledge can and should be used to make a positive difference. And young people are at that critical time when they can easily become accustomed to the notion of diverse religious thought. There are middle school students in Whitwell, Tennessee, who have shown that this is possible for young people, not only to move beyond ignorance and indifference, but to the point of making a difference. The population of Whitwell is remarkably similar to the town that I grew up in here in Wisconsin. It's 98% white. The number of Christians, Muslims, and Jews is 0. Yet in 1998, students at Whitwell developed a memorial for the Holocaust. They acquired one of the cars that was used to transport Jews to Auschwitz and started collecting paper clips, one to symbolize each Jew that was killed by a Nazi, just to give a visual representation of exactly how many 6 million really is. The memorial is still there today. You can go see it. It's being run by the current generation of middle school students. A truly amazing thing, when you consider all of the actions of these children, the hatred and the violence, the compassion and the caring, is that they all had the same root. Someone taught these children. Eric was a member of the Church of Israel, which has been linked with the Christian identity movement. The church's founder, Dan Gaiman, denies the connection, despite the church's connection to several religious radicals. Similarly, it's difficult to identify the specific people who influenced the 3 men who opened fire in the Islamic College, other than to say that they were connected with the Jewish underground. For Hasib and Shahzad, it was a man named Mohammed Sadiq Khan, one of their fellow suicide bombers, but more importantly, their mentor at the Hamara Youth Access Point, which was a center for teens. Jermaine, their other companion, was influenced by a man named Abdullah al-Faisal, an imam convicted of trying to incite sectarian murders 2 years before the bombings. And for the students at Whitwell, the impetus for the Paperclips Memorial was a teacher and his diversity training. So this is the reason I'm standing up here today, to say that we need to acknowledge that reality. Our children, or future children, are constantly shaped by the people around them, especially those imbued with authority, like teachers and religious officiants. We need to lay claim to the reality and use it to equip the children for the future. A future that is inherently diverse, not just of gender and race, which we already teach about the equality and diversity of, but of religion as well. We live in a society that values the separation of church and state. For some, it's the fear that religious institutions will influence government. For others, it's that government will corrupt their religious institutions. And while for both, the concerns are real and legitimate, that fear has driven us to separate the two in every possible way. What is needed is for our public education to incorporate religious studies into social studies programs. Cultures do not exist independent of religion. It is part of who and what people are. Yet all too often, we teach about countries of the world as if their religion made no difference. The education that needs to be provided for the future has to have 3 key facets. It must be academic. Anything taught about religion in public schools can only have an academic flavor to it. It has to avoid faith statements. It must tread lightly on controversial issues. Something like this is difficult enough without ruffling the feathers of either side of the conflict. It must begin early. The example of Whitwell shows us that the students can understand these topics and they can flourish as early as middle school. As religion is part of any culture, it should be part of any cultural, historical, or social education class. Additionally, children can be and are exposed to extremist views and biases at all ages. The longer we wait to educate children, the more difficult these views are to combat. Finally, it must emphasize diversity. One of the most common weapons for propagating hate is the straw man. All liberals are not Bill Ayers. All conservatives are not Rush Limbaugh. All Muslims are not Osama bin Laden. But this is the argument that proponents of hate like to use. All of a group is only like the worst of those claiming membership. By emphasizing that there is not one Judaism, one Christianity, one Islam, we weaken the arguments of extremists. So today, you've heard from three of us who've talked about seemingly divergent topics, save for the topic of religion. We spoke about race and religion, about the influence of the media, and about public education. But at the core of everything we've come here to talk about is one major issue: the danger of ignorance. Whether it's how we treat someone for their appearance, how what we see and hear influences us, or simply whether or not we talk about it, we help to skew the world in one direction or another. So with that knowledge, we turn to you in hope that you will help us to continue this dialogue, to make understanding about religious diversity, about negative influence, and about preparing our children a part of the public discourse. Thank you.